Welcome to episode 4 of DCS Film-Makers School. It's your boy Adlertag, and I'll be your host. Before we get started, just wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to everyone who subscribed, liked, and left a comment or question. I really look forward to getting feedback from you guys, so that's always a positive thing. So thank you very much for all that, folks. And if you're new here, just to get you up to speed, the concept is, as an independent filmmaker, I'm trying to take some of the techniques, ideas, and concepts that I use in live action filmmaking and apply them to DCS so that we can all bring our DCS videos up a notch. So hopefully in this episode I will earn your subscription. Maybe you'll leave a like, and definitely if you have a comment or a question about something, if something wasn't clear, just let me know in the comments below. So with that out of the way, let's get started. In this episode, initially I was going to follow up the last episode we did, episode 3, which was focusing on light and how light is used to convey mood and set the tone for your film. In this one, I was initially going to follow it up with color and the psychology of color and the psychology of color in film and how that can also be used. But I decided that that might be better suited for when I'm tackling the subject of color grading and color correction, which will be in a later episode. So in this episode, what we're going to talk about is another way in which you can make your DCS videos more quote-unquote cinematic, and that has to do with the more technical side of resolution and aspect ratio. And I'm also going to show you why there's a couple of things to avoid when dealing with resolution and aspect ratio, and I'm going to show you a way around one of the biggest problems. So with that out of the way, let's get started. Okay, so resolution and aspect ratio, what are they and how do we use them in our DCS videos? Let's start with resolution. As you can see on screen, resolution is the measurement of available screen space used to create the image, listed in pixels by width and height. Special note, width is always listed before height. So let's take a look at how this translates to our actual screens. Okay, so here we see a typical flat screen computer monitor, LED TV, whatever you want to call it. And it's typical one that you could technically get at Best Buy, Walmart, wherever. So how does the resolution translate? So using our example from before of 1920 by 1080, the resolution would play out like this. 1920 is your width of the screen from left to right. The 1080 would be the height from top to bottom. Now that's considered HD resolution, and while it doesn't sound like a lot, if you do a little math and take 1920 times 1080, what you get is you'll get 2,073,600 pixels. That's the resolution of your image. And of course, the higher the resolution, the more detail you can get from your image, because exponentially those numbers will increase. Okay, so what would I recommend for DCS videos in terms of resolution? Well, the first one and the minimum would be 1920 by 1080, which equals HD or high definition. Because DCS, a lot of the appeal is in the detail of the imagery that it produces. Anything less than this is sort of going to look crappy by comparison, so I would say minimum 1920 by 1080p. The next one I would recommend is 2048 by 1080p or 2560 by 1440p. Both are considered 2K or QHD, which is Quad HD. And just so that you'll know, any resolution with a width in the 2000s is considered 2K. And finally is my preferred one, my recommended, which is 3840 by 2160p, which is 4K or Ultra HD, which is the UHD. That one brings out the most detail in your images and so on and so forth. So those would be my recommendations. Obviously, your mileage may vary depending on your hardware and your computer setup for capturing and how you run DCS. But at a minimum, I would say 1920 by 1080p would be the lowest resolution you'd want to go. Okay, while we're on the subject, you probably noticed the little letter P at the end of all those resolutions. And what this stands for is progressive scan. With modern technology, it's an irrelevant term. It's what I would refer to as a legacy selling point. It sounds good, but they're really not telling you much of anything. What progressive scan refers to is that the entire image is drawn on screen for each frame. And this was in opposition to what was known as interlaced scanning. And that was the original TVs and computer monitors used a cathode ray tube, which would excite particles and then send them out on a beam onto the inner surface of a screen. And this would have to scan all the odd lines of the image and then come back around to the top and scan all the even lines of an image for each frame, and that would give you the complete image. It's why prior to the early 2000s, if you ever paused a DVD or a VHS, you would see an image that kind of looks like what you're seeing on screen right now, and that was because you were pausing an interlaced image. With progressive scan, you wouldn't have that. Each image is drawn in its entirety on screen in one shot. So the P in 1080p or 1440p is pretty much irrelevant with the advent of pixel technology and LEDs and OLEDs and QLEDs. The entire image is drawn on screen at one time. And you can see this if you turn on your monitor before you turn on your computer. You'll see your monitor does light up even though the screen is black, and that's because the entire screen is being lit so that when the image from your computer is sent through from your graphics card, everything's lit up at one time. So just so that you know, P is an irrelevant term in 2021. If you really want to throw somebody for a loop, go to Best Buy and ask them to show you a CRT monitor that will display in 720i. They're going to give you the same confused look your dog gives you when you try to feed him peanut butter. Anyway, just putting that out there. So let's move on now to aspect ratio. Aspect ratio, simply put, is the ratio of an image's width in relation to its height. How wide is it compared to how tall it is? And most of us interact with this on some level in our daily lives, and we don't even realize it. For instance, if you whip out your cell phone to take a picture, do you hold it vertically or do you hold it horizontally? That's adjusting the aspect ratio of the image. Or if you're at work or at home and you go to print a document, when it gives you the option of portrait or landscape, again, adjusting the aspect ratio. For our purposes as DCS filmmakers, what it applies to is how our audience is going to be watching our videos. And that comes down to the aspect ratio of the monitors. So let's take a look. Okay, so on screen you see what amounts to almost everybody is using one of these two types of monitors. Either they're using a monitor with an aspect ratio of 16:9, which is the majority of people. I would say a good 60 to 70% of people out there are using that. I actually use a dual monitor setup and they're both 16:9. Since 2017, with the introduction of the 21:9 monitors, prices have come down, so a lot of people are starting to use those as well. There's a good percentage of guys in my flight group that have the quote-unquote ultra-wide monitors, and they tend to be 21:9. So I would say 30 to 40% of our community of gamers and flight simmers are using that. So as DCS filmmakers, we have to factor in both of these types of monitors. Just a couple of things I want to note real quick here. The aspect ratio is independent of size. So you can have an 85-inch 16:9 monitor. You can also have a 15-inch 21:9 monitor. The size of the monitor is irrelevant to the aspect ratio because the aspect ratio scales proportionally. It's sort of a fixed entity, the same way resolution is independent of the size of the screen. Also, I've left out intentionally 4:3 because that's sort of a throwback legacy issue. The 4:3 aspect ratio was used in the old school TVs you probably grew up with in the 80s and 90s, as well as the original CRT computer monitors. They're the more squared ones. In 2021, almost no one is using those. So for the purposes of our conversation, I'm not including those. And the last thing is I'm not including a lot of the film making aspect ratios and histories, 1.33 to 1 and 1.85 to 1 and 235 to 1 and 70 millimeter versus 35 millimeter. None of that is relevant to our conversation here, with the exception of maybe two. They're not really relevant to what we as DCS filmmakers need to keep in mind. So I'm leaving all of that stuff out. You're welcome to go look it up if you want. It's an in-depth subject, and lots of history there and stuff like that, but for our purposes, we don't need to include it. All right, so the big question is, how do we get our videos to look cinematic on both a 16:9 screen and a 21:9 screen? And that is the key thing that affects us DCS filmmakers. So let's take a look, first, what we mean by cinematic, and then secondly, what not to do. And then thirdly, I'm going to show you how you can actually get your videos to play really good and quote-unquote cinematic on both a 16:9 and a 21:9 monitor. So let's get started. Okay, so one of the biggest faux pas I see a lot of DCS filmmakers make is when they slap the term cinematic on their videos. Usually it comes from a misunderstanding of actually what it takes to make your DCS video look cinematic. Putting aside editing, pacing, cinematography, lighting, color correcting, color grading, audio mixing, etc., they tend to take the route of, okay, I'm going to slap some black bars at the top and bottom of the screen, and that's going to make my video look more cinematic, i.e. they think making it letterboxing the video is going to make it cinematic. And to me, that shows a misunderstanding of what's actually going on there and how to apply it. The reason why videos with letterboxing are considered cinematic has less to do with the black bars, the actual letterboxing, and more to do with the fact that over the past 20, 30, 40 years, we've all gotten used to the idea that films, which tend to have a wider aspect ratio than the TVs or monitors we were watching them on, would letterbox because there was dead space on the screen. That's actually what letterboxing is. So it's not so much the black bars that are giving it the cinematic effect, it's more the aspect ratio of a wider image in relation to its height that's making it seem more cinematic. And so just slapping some black bars on something, it really isn't gonna change much. Not to mention, with newer monitors and newer monitor technology, it may actually make your image look worse on some of the newer 21:9 monitors. And I'll show you what a lot of DCS filmmakers do, and I'll explain why you shouldn't do it, and I'll show you what you should be doing to get your DCS video to still look cinematic on both a 16:9 and a 21:9 screen. But I just wanted to explain how most people misinterpret that term cinematic in relation to letterboxing. It's more about the width and the height of the image than it is about the black bars on the image. All right, let's move on. Okay, so here's what most DCS filmmakers will do. I've got my timeline opened in my editing program, and as you can see, it's a 16:9 aspect ratio, and don't mind my mouse, it's a little bit off. So anyway, what they'll do is they'll take their footage, they'll drag it in at 16:9, then they think they want to make it cinematic, so what they'll do is they'll go up and they'll grab some predetermined overlay to drop over it that just has black bars. And as you can see, I'm sort of setting it up, strengthening it out. Then you got to scale it up. Again, my mouse is a little bit out of whack here, so I'm actually adjusting the scale, and you'll see there's the black bars, and they think, okay, so now I've got a widescreen image. I've made a cinematic image. That won't work, and I'm about to show you why. Okay, so here we have our two monitors, our 16:9 and our 21:9, and on the 16:9 monitor, we have the image that I just showed you how most people will create create a quote-unquote letterboxed cinematic image by baking in an overlay on top of their image. And the reason why that doesn't work is because in essence you are not adjusting any aspect ratio. What you are simply doing is taking an overlay of black bars and you're baking it into the 16:9 image. So the image ultimately is still 16:9, you just have black bars at the top and bottom. And that's not going to work for somebody with a 21:9 monitor. And as more and more people are getting those monitors, it's going to become more and more of an issue. Let's take a look. If we take the image from the 16:9 monitor and without changing anything, we just put it onto the 21:9 monitor. As you can see, it's causing all sorts of problems. What you'll do is, because the black bars are baked into the footage, you will still get the black bars at the top and bottom of the image. But what you'll also get, because the aspect ratio has not changed from 16:9, what you'll get is you'll get what's known as pillar boxing, and that's the black bars on the left and right of the 21:9 aspect ratio screen. So in essence, someone watching your video full screen, if all you've done is used black bars as an overlay to make it quote-unquote cinematic, now you've actually made your image look worse to somebody watching it on a better monitor. So how can we avoid it? Well, with a little simple math and adjusting some settings and how we edit and export videos, we can get around this problem and make our videos both cinematic on a 16:9 full screen and a 21:9 full screen. And let's get into how to do it. It's just a little math and changing some settings, and it's really simple. So let's get started. Okay, in order to do this, what we have to do is we have to convert our video into anamorphic. And what that means for film and video is that the image will automatically scale to the screen aspect ratio that it's being shown on. So here's the equation that you need to do. What you would do is you would take the resolution width number and you would divide that by the aspect ratio number for the width, and then you would take the result and multiply that by 9. What this will give you is the new resolution height number. And then we can take that number and we can feed that into our editing system and output our video in a resolution that we know will, because it's anamorphic, scale accordingly based on whether the viewer is watching it full screen on a 16:9 or a 21:9 video. So let's see how to do this. Okay, so here we are in the editing program, and as you can see, it's a regular 1920 by 1080 image. Just to let you know, I'm using Premiere Pro CC, so DaVinci Resolve and Final Cut Pro, Final Cut X, and other editing software will allow you to do the same thing, but the buttons may be located in a different location, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so here we have our workspace. It's regular 1920 by 1080. What you're going to do, or what I would do in this case, is I am going to come up to my sequence tab and then go to sequence settings. And then you'll see the first tab gives me my resolution. First, I'm going to set it to be custom. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the resolution using the new anamorphic numbers that we just pulled from the previous segment. So it'll be 3840 for the width. That'll stay the same. And then on the height, we're going to do 1645. That will be the height. Now, just a note for Premiere users, in your preview file setting right down here, Premiere Pro doesn't like using the iframe MPEG at these resolutions, so you're going to have to change it. I usually go with the GoPro 10-bit, It has to do with color space and whatnot. Anyway, now what you'll see is that the new resolution is at 3840 by 1645. So we use the equation to get those numbers, and now we punch them into our system. And what that does, you'll notice, is the playback window in my editor changed to accommodate that new resolution. So that's how you would convert your video to anamorphic. So now that your video is anamorphic, it will automatically scale to the aspect ratio of the screen that it's being viewed on. Since we've set the resolution to a 21:9 monitor, what that will mean is that when you full screen your DCS video on a 16:9 monitor, it will look like this. But if you full screen the same video on a 21:9 monitor, it will look like this. And thus, you've got your cinematic look built into your anamorphic video, and regardless of what type of aspect ratio the person is viewing it on, they're gonna get the same effect. As proof of this, I'm going to leave this image on screen for a couple of seconds. It's full screened, so just as a sort of viewer participation moment, for you guys watching on a 16:9 monitor, if you hit full screen, you should see the letterboxing bars at the top and bottom. However, for you folks watching on a 21:9 monitor, if you hit full screen, you should see the image encompass the full screen. No bars on the top and bottom. That's anamorphic video. Leave a comment below. That would be great, whether you used a 16:9 or a 21:9 monitor, and let me know the results. It would be interesting to hear back from you guys on what you thought about that. So as one last final, hurrah, that I'm going to put out there, simply because I appreciate all the people who take the time out to watch these videos. I know sometimes it can be long. I've gone ahead and run the numbers and done all the math. So what I'll put up on screen right now is the 1920 by 1080 converted to anamorphic, what you should be setting your sequence as. I will put up the 2560 by 1440p numbers so that you'll know what to set your settings as, and obviously the 3840 by 2160 numbers I will put up there again, just so that you guys don't have to do the math for all of that stuff. Alright, so there you have it. You've managed to do the cinematic look in a proper way. We've also converted our videos to anamorphic so that we can factor in different viewer experiences. And we learned a little history and knowledge about resolutions and aspect ratio and how they play off of each other. So I hope you found that informative. Again, I didn't do a really deep dive, believe it or not. There's a lot more to a lot of these subjects, but I was just trying to boil it down to what would be applicable to someone making DCS videos, which is the whole point of this. So I hope you found that useful. I hope you found it helpful. Remember to hit that subscribe button, because there'll be more videos coming out in the series. Also hit the notifications and drop a like if you feel like doing so. And also leave a comment. I really like interacting with viewers and getting other people's perspectives and answering questions and so on and so forth. So I'd appreciate those of you who took the time out to do that. So again, I hope this has been helpful. I'm just trying to do my part here to better our community and make better videos, and we all have a fun time watching all this stuff on YouTube. So with that, I am going to check out and call it a day. So happy hunting, and I will see you in the skies.